Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Mark Gane. You know him from Martha and the Muffins, but Mark, you have a brand new album of your own.
I do indeed. It's taken a while to get out, but here it is.
And it's quite the album too. I've listened to the songs, and this is a real departure from Martha and the Muffins. I mean, that was great music on its own, and congratulations to all the success globally you've had with that. And you and Martha, Martha is your life partner. You've had a long time and some really wonderful experiences with the music over the years. Now, I understand that a couple of things have kind of led to this. Martha's health failing kind of led to not doing so much with Martha and the Muffins.
Well, it wasn't so much not doing a lot because we're actually really active and have been really active, putting out reissues of old albums and working with other songwriters and doing collaborations like that and newer projects as well. But just to step back a bit, Martha was diagnosed with Parkinson's back in 2000. So she's now been living with that for 25 years. And we did a few shows in the early 2000s, but it was getting apparent that she wasn't able to perform at the level that she wanted to. So we stopped playing live, but it didn't stop us from recording. So we're still very active that way, and we do workarounds with her. The nature of Parkinson's is that the drugs work some of the time and they don't work all of the time. So we try and schedule, if she's going to do some singing, we try and do that when the drugs are working well. We don't do it when they're not working well. And we do a lot of overdubbing of her voice so that, more than doubling. There's one song we had called Summer Song that we did 22 overdubs of her voice, and it gave this really nice warm, cloudy quality. She's got a warm, kind of cloudy voice at times anyway, but it kind of exaggerated that, and it actually worked out really well. So there are workarounds around all of this, but we are definitely active as a studio band for sure.
Okay, so you've gone to like the Steely Dan format, if you will.
Somewhat.
Yeah. So this album, from what I understand, is years and years in the making. I understand that you had old recordings going back to your mother in the 50s.
I've when I started to make this album, I went back into my quote unquote sound library. I've been recording just miscellaneous sounds for 40 plus years, but the oldest thing, as you say, is a recording my mother made in 1950 before I was born as a Valentine's present to my dad. So she sang two standards, and one of them was "You Can't Take That Away from Me," and I have to go back to the original vinyl to see what the second one was. But and then at the very end she goes, "Happy Valentine's Day, darling." So for copyright reasons, I couldn't just use those songs. So what I did was I extrapolated her piano playing because she was a great pianist. So she played and sang on this little present, and I chopped it up and created sort of a new piece out of the two songs that bear no resemblance to them at all. And then but the big challenge with that one was cleaning up the audio because as you can imagine, a 70-year-old recording on vinyl was just a massive amount of scratches and stuff. And I wanted to preserve some of that quality, which you probably couldn't help but do. But I did, with the help of my friend and audio genius, Ray Dillard, managed to get rid of a lot of it. But that was the backbone of that. So yeah, I've been utilizing a lot of sounds. That was one of the more, moving ones for me to go back and listen to that. And it's like a voice from the past that obviously, as my mother, I was deeply committed or connected to, rather.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. And this is part of the magic of the recording process, is that there were so many great voices that, as far as I'm concerned, they're still with us. To me, John Lennon is still with us, you know, and in that same way, for you, maybe your mom is still with you.
Well, yeah, and that's in a way that's kind of the live experience versus the recording experience. Like long after we're all gone, if you're lucky enough to have some work out there that you've recorded, it lives on. And I'm sure my mother had no inkling that this thing she was doing as a young woman would ever end up on her son who was yet to be born recording decades later. She would have been so happy about that. And given the fact that we don't really know a lot about time and space, maybe she's actually heard it in whatever dimension she's in right now.
Yeah, you're drawing a lot of similarities in my mind to my late friend Terry Draper from Klaatu. He was somewhat of a soundscape artist as well, and I was fortunate to play on three of the tracks from his Infinity record, and at the time I questioned whether the song Infinity was him questioning his own mortality, and he gave me a totally different answer. But looking back on it now, I think maybe he was. And speaking of soundscapes, I I've always perceived you as the guitar player in Martha and the Muffins, but this is not a guitar record. There's a lot going on here. Now, would you consider yourself a multi-instrumentalist, or are you literally a sound sculptor in that regard?
I would say both. I would also add that there is some guitar on this album, but you probably don't recognize it as guitar. Um, But I've been doing experimental music long before Martha and the Muffins. And I had a great friend in high school who introduced me to all sorts. I don't know where he was picking up on all this stuff, but he was introducing me to like all the heavyweight modern composers of the mid 20th century, stuff like I think the first time he came over, he brought Miles Davis's Bitches Brew album, which was probably one of Miles's most outside albums, and the third King Crimson album, Lizard, which is definitely one of the weirdest that they did. And so he was always uh, bringing me things and going, "Hey, you got to check out Sun Ra and stuff like that," or Steve Reich or somebody. So I was exposed to all that pretty early, and I just found it really interesting. And then when I attended the Ontario College of Art in Toronto, which is now OCAD University, but then back then it was a real art college. But it had a sound lab, a small, very basic sound studio, and that's where I started doing these things. So it's been with me a long time. As a guitarist, I don't even think of myself a lot of the time as a guitarist. To me, almost the guitar, it has a whole, obviously the electric guitar is a very multi-function instrument. You can play any kind of music on it and it can sound radically different. But in my case, I kind of see it when I'm not doing sort of straighter things like Martha and the Muffins songs, although a lot of those aren't particularly straight, but conventional, I guess. I see the guitar as just this instrument for creating sounds or noise, um, or textures. So, for instance, like someone like Robert Fripp of King Crimson has been a huge influence on me because he completely expanded, with Frippatronics and the ambient things he did with Eno. He completely expanded what a guitar could sound like and what it could do.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's really interesting, because I've been a lead singer and a guitarist for most of my musical career, and I'm not as busy as I once was. But for years and years, I was playing guitar in other people's bands, and it was always you had to learn these covers note for note. And at a certain point in time, I got tired of A, being in other people's bands, and B, being a cover guy. It was just boring. I felt like after 40 years, how many frickin' times do I have to sing It's Been a Hard Day's Night? And as a guitarist, I've started dabbling in different tunings and different tones and so on. And I was never a pedals guy. And now I've got a pedal board that's got, a harmonious pedal on it and the delay and chorus, not chorus, EQ, things that I've never used, because it seems like you need to open some doors, open some windows and let some light in, maybe.
Well, that's a dark hole to fall into. It's almost like modular synthesizers. Like I've never gone. I've got actually a Synthie A, which is one of the first modular synths, like from 1971. But and I love it, and I still use it a lot. But it's like the modular synth thing is like a dark. It's like going down the rabbit hole, and so are guitar pedals. Like this, I mean. I've said this to Martha, like, television drama and guitar pedals were in the golden age for both of them. You there's a lot of great television drama or out there, and there's no end. If you like exploring textures and stuff, I mean, the guitar pedals are insane now. And just as a tip, maybe you do this already, Tommy, but whenever I'm confronted with a new guitar pedal, I go, okay, that sounds, that looks really cool, but I close my eyes when somebody's demoing it, and I go, A, have I heard the sound before? B, if I haven't, can I get it on a pedal I already have? And C, if it's doing something radically different, then I'm probably interested.
Ah,
But, I don't know if that's a useful tip for you. It might help curb your appetite or your pocketbook anyway.
I'm old enough to know better than to not ask questions and not listen to the answers. So we're never too old to learn new things, as far as I'm concerned. Speaking of new things, the point of this interview is to talk about your new album, right? And it's quite something. It's to me, it's very ethereal sounding, and it's songs from the garden. Um, it 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 really it makes you think a lot of different things, but I imagine you being in your garden. I imagine my wife being in her garden listening to this music. And maybe I think we should maybe take a minute and give the people a sample of Love Lies Bleeding. What do you think?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
The sun is sinking in the west. I walk the fields alone. Honeybee, you're gone for good, and so I sing the song. 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 The sun is sinking in the west. I walk the fields alone. Honeybee, you're gone for good, and so I sing the song. And so I sing the song.
That really is some interesting music, man. And I can't imagine the time and the effort that you put into this. It's so interesting. That's the best way I can put it.
Well, it was quite a process. And I guess the trick as a composer is knowing when to stop, in a particular track or a particular piece. And so a lot of it was very time consuming because I was manipulating and tweaking sounds. Sometimes the sound is great without having to do anything to it, and I can think of a lot of examples on this album. Like for instance, there's a piece called Johnny Jump Up, and the core of that is this weird loopy thing I did with rhythm back in about 1982 or 1983. And it was taken from a late night, I think David Letterman's late night talk show. And, I just stumbled across that looking for what would Johnny Jump Up sound like. And there it was, I thought, and I didn't have to do much to that, but what I put around it sort of augmented it. And there was a lot of tweaking and editing with that. And so this project, as much as it involves some playing, a lot of it was choosing things that already existed in my sound library and then deciding how much had to be done to that sound in order to bring it into a final condition.
Yeah, and your PR people describe you as a solitary gardener of sound, sowing strangeness and beauty in equal measure. And I think that's an apt description for this project.
Well, it was very solitary. Yeah. It wasn't like I was inviting tons of people in to collaborate or play on it. It was more that I was kind of delving back through the decades of stuff I'd saved and going, okay, what am I going to do with it? And it was a very contemplative, intuitive solo effort in all senses of the word. The people that were collaborated that I collaborated with tended to be those that were already on the recordings, like my mother. In a sense, there was a collaboration there, even though she wasn't here in the flesh. And there's other sonic elements where there's other people involved, but I'd already recorded them and I was going, okay, what can I do with this weird screechy noise that my friend did in 1985?
Yeah.
And I went, oh, here, hold on, here's a microphone. I don't know what I'm going to do with this if ever, but here it is. And then, I dug it up and on we went.
Yeah, and it's very interesting stuff. Now, speaking of collaborators, I know that you were almost completely solo on this project with a few notable exceptions, but you've worked with people like Laurie Anderson, Daniel Lanois. So that had to be, those had to be some interesting experiences for you.
Yeah, the Laurie Anderson thing happened back in the days of the art college, and she did a performance in Walker Court at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And as part of her visit up to Toronto, she came to the art college and sort of gave a talk, I guess, and probably talked about her methods, and also got some of us who were taking sound studies to help her make this happen in Walker Court. And that was quite an eye-opening experience. I already knew about her because every year the art college would do a bus trip down to New York. So probably sometime around 1975, 76, we were down there and there was a very early exhibit of Laurie Anderson and it was brilliant. She used sort of 16 millimeter tape as sound scores and she had her audio tape violin and a brilliant woman. So that was a great experience. And then of course Martha and the Muffins did 3 albums with Dan and they were we did great work with him. He was like an extra member of the band, sort of like George Martin being the fifth Beatle. And nothing was too weird for Dan, like if I wanted to throw a bunch of cartons down the stairs and slow it down 5 octaves. He was already setting the mics up. Uh,
Uh,
yeah, and of course his sister was in the band too.
so you were one of his earlier projects, really.
Yeah, our first album with him was our third album called This Is the Ice Age, and that was late 80, early 81. And we had done Virgin Records wanted us to do a demo for the third album. And we said, okay. And at that time, we had just met Jocelyn Lanois. And she said, well, my brothers, Dan and Bob, have this studio in Hamilton. Why don't we do it there? And we went, okay, sure, why not? And we did it. And the chemistry was so good. And he was so different from our earlier production producer interactions that we knew he was the guy. And once that album was done, we just kept wanting to work with him. So we did 3 albums total with him.
It's interesting just how important the role of a good producer is when you're trying to craft something special. I know personally, I recorded a lot of stuff years ago that I'm not really crazy about, but I never really had a good producer until I'm going to say 10, 12 years ago. And now I've got a guy who, when he's at the console, he's kind of, bouncing around, bopping to the music, and he's really enthusiastic and he has good ideas without being too critical. And I get the feeling that Daniel Lanois is probably very much like that. I sense that he's probably very open and very happy to be there.
Yeah, it's definitely in his blood. Like, he just has this inherent ability to understand what sound is and what's needed or what can take it, how to make it into something magical. And I think certainly that was one of the reasons Brian Eno started working with him. He recognized that. I think Dan had already done uh, the Birdie album with Peter Gabriel, and I think that opened up the doors for him a lot. People just started going, well, this guy's got something. But that first album, he didn't have any art college sensibilities. Like he was more of a roots guy. And he said, with Ice Age, like, Mark, I mean, I was following your lead on this. I didn't know, what we were doing here. But the great thing about him was that he was open to it. It wasn't like, we had a previous producer who every time I dragged my little modular synth out, to make some strange noise, they go, you could almost feel them rolling their eyes and going, oh God, Mark's gonna waste an hour of our studio time doing some blippy bloppy thing, Dan was completely the opposite. There was nothing that fazed him. And he, not only did he have a lot of talent on his own, but he was able to recognize when he could learn as well from other people.
And I think a good producer as well is willing to record everything, and then you use what you need.
Yeah, and he was very much like, if something good was happening in the studio, he worried less about getting a technically great setup and just throw a mic up and go, okay, you're in the spirit now, go for it. And that ability to understand what's going on is perhaps rare or is not as common as it should be among producers. So yeah, the role of a producer, they can make or break a project. It's such a delicate balance of elements when you're in the studio and the mood.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I mean, there's only so many notes that we have to work with, in a realistic um, frame. And you can take a 1-4-5 progression and make it really groove, or you can make it really stiff and not easy to listen to. Um, I want to get back to garden music for a minute. This is really something special. I understand that it can be purchased at your Bandcamp. So is it markgane.bandcamp.com?
Yeah. Yeah. But just go to Bandcamp and search Mark Gane or Garden Music and it'll be right up. And it's on Apple Music and a few other online platforms, but I deliberately left it off Spotify. Um, and I think everybody should. We're in the middle of like dumping the, the songs that we control off there. It's not as easy as you would think, but we are in the process of doing that. And I want to contact our labels that still, own slash control the first 3 albums and say, you really, we're asking you to take this stuff off. And it's a bit of a hit for money, but I mean, like it's blood money. That guy, Daniel Ek is like invested in a AI arms company and it's the same technology that's killing children in Palestine. I'm done with that. Like I want nothing to do with it.
I agree 100%. I've not released anything to Spotify myself personally in years, and I don't know if I've lost anything or not because I'm not hugely famous. Tommy Solo's famous friends aside, the fact is that I agree with the political statement, and the whole notion that we shouldn't be giving everything to the billionaires. How many billions do the billionaires need? Apparently all of them.
Yeah.
And there's so much
No,
disparity in the world because of it. That
yeah.
said, I don't want to take up your whole day, Mark. I do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this with me. And I'm going to ask one more question. What's next for you?
Well, the encouraging response I've had for this made me think maybe I should do a Garden Music Volume 2 because I've certainly got a lot of leftover interesting names and a lot of material that I could use. However, I have another solo project that has only been on the cards for about 20 years. Oh, but and it's more of a conventional song structure, and it's based around kind of a doomed love affair in that takes place in a doomed landscape. The landscape being the suburbs, which are kind of like a metaphor, like hydro towers and dead farmland that's being built over. It's sort of like a metaphor for their relationship. Um, and it's called Beautiful Vaughn. I can make comments about the suburbs because I grew up in them. I'm not doing this from some lofty height or anything, but that might be the next thing. And also there's a Martha and the Muffins live at Ontario Place 1983 recording we never released, recorded by Dan Lanois. The band was expanded at that time. It was great. So we're starting to work on putting that out as well.
This is really interesting. Wow. Well, we're all going to look forward to all these new projects. And I got to tell you, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I thank you so much for taking the time. And until next time, cheers.
Thank you, Tommy.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. Don't forget to look for the accompanying articles based on these interviews at 519magazine.com. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.